What's happening, Expeditioners? It's Peter here, founder of Expedition Money. I want to talk to you today about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's buying cars on Facebook Marketplace. I've done it a number of times here. I actually don't know how many times I've done it, but done it a number of times, helped some people do it, helped my cousin do it. And there are a number of things, and I'm not saying that this will 100% protect you from getting scammed on Facebook Marketplace. I'm not saying that at all. There's probably no way to do that, except for never buying anything on Facebook Marketplace. Keep that in mind, right? I'm not responsible for what you do, but this is my best advice as someone who has bought a number of things, including a number of cars on Facebook Marketplace. And this is also not to say that any of the specific tips that I give you are indicative of a scam. They may be, but there may be reasons that they are totally legitimate, okay? Okay, so the first tip I want to give you is actually a reverse. It's actually a good sign that the listing is not a scam. So if you go to Facebook Marketplace, I don't know if you've ever used it, but one of the things that I like about Facebook Marketplace over, say, Craigslist or some of the other listings is that it's tied to your user profile, right? And so a lot of people have been on Facebook for a number of years, 10 years, 20 years, more, right? And so if someone has their profile on there and they're going to list some stuff, they usually don't want to have any issue because you can maybe look at their profile picture and see where they live and some of the other things and see what the ratings are on selling other stuff. So usually there's a little bit more at risk, right? There's more incentive for them to be cautious about being a good seller or a good buyer on Facebook Marketplace and other places where you don't necessarily have this long history tied to it. If you are selling something on Facebook Marketplace, one of the things that I think is kind of dumb, but it actually usually means to me that the person is real, is when they cover up the license plate. Now, I think it's dumb here because, first of all, you're driving around your car with your license plate uncovered, so 50,000 people a day can see your license plate. Secondly, as far as I know, license plate data is not available to the public, so you have to be a private investigator or law enforcement to figure out, to take license plate information and turn it into an address. I know some places have some workarounds for that. You can buy some data and things like that. But generally, when I see a person's listing and they have put a towel or a rag or they're holding their thumb up to the camera, blocking out the license plate, it bugs me because I don't even really care what it says. But usually that means to me, it's someone who's a little paranoid and they're a real seller. It's usually not a scammer blocking that out. It's usually a real seller they're going to look up my license plate. Good on you. If you want to block your license plate, absolutely do it. I've got multiple cars with multiple license plates and I've never blocked any of them and never had an issue with it. And I drive around in public with everyone being able to see them. So license plate covered, ironically, to me, is maybe a good sign that they're legit. Because if you were faker, you're usually not covering the license plate, right? Okay. The other thing I want to say here is that you usually want to look for is that long profile history, right? So what you can do is, if you're looking at the listing, you can see who that seller is. And if you click on their profile, it'll take you to their profile page. Now, you may not be able to see a lot because they may not share a lot with the public if you're not friends. Sometimes I click on them and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're friends of a friend or a friend of mine or something like that. So that's always a little funny. But if you're buying locally, that can happen more often than not. But if you click on their profile, and that they just set up a profile. So it's 2025 and that they set up a profile because you see a listing and you're like, man, that's a great price. That's an awesome car. I got to jump on this. It's a cash deal. This person's leaving the country in 3 days or whatever. And you look and they just set up that profile. The profile was set up 2 months ago or 6 months ago or in 2025, or even in the last year. That can be a red flag that person's a scammer, right? Because they don't have that long history. One, most people who have been on Facebook have been on there for a while. Facebook is actually having a growth problem, not really getting a lot of people in. And so usually that means to me is that they are scamming people to list something else. Now that they've gotten caught, they have to set up a new profile and scam again. But if you look at it, it says 2009, 2005, 2012, whatever, you can probably be pretty comfortable that person's been around, especially if they have other things listed, if they've been listing things a while. Sometimes I look at the listings and do they make sense? I'm looking and, they have a lawnmower, and I look at their other listings and they have a variety of lawnmowers and some farm equipment and some industrial equipment. Yeah, this may mean they're just liquidating that kind of stuff. But if they're selling a Van Gogh and then also, I don't know, hair cleaning supplies, that doesn't necessarily equate to any sort of logic to me. Okay, those are the first two. The first one, license plate cover, user profile. All right. The one that usually makes me pretty skeptical is when there are no license plates on the car at all. Okay. Now, if you are looking at a listing that is by a dealer, there's probably a reason that there's no license plate on there. They don't have a license plate. The dealers don't necessarily have to. But if it's a private party selling the car, hey, this is my own personal car, and there's no license plates on it, that is usually a red flag to me, because most people, like I said, will put a towel over their license plate, but they will not take the license plates off. License plates are notoriously hard to get off, especially as those nuts and bolts rust. And so most people just don't take them off. They just cover it up or do something like that. So they won't take it off to take pictures and then put them back on. So if they don't have license plates on there and they are a private party or a private seller, that is usually a red flag to me. Okay. The other thing that is a red flag is if they are showing interior pictures of the car and they have floor protectors on them, like those paper floor mats or those plastic floor mats. When you go to the oil change place or you go to the car dealership and you get your car back and they're still on the floor, those are usually for workers who might be stepping in stuff or oil or whatever. Then get in your car, it's going to be on that mat. It's not going to be on your car. Private sellers usually do not have those because you have to buy those in like 100 packs. So if you are taking a picture of a car and it's your car, you usually don't have that. Now, there could be some exceptions, right? Maybe they took it to the detailer shop to get detailed and maybe they'll put them in there. But usually if you're selling a car, what you don't want to show is the floor protectors. You want all that out there. Especially if you took it to a detailer shop, you want to show how clean those mats are. You want to show how spotless this car is. Floor protectors in a car are a red flag to me too. The other thing here is that those last two red flags to me, no license plates and floor protectors or some other protective equipment on the car, usually say to me that they are stolen images. So images of a new car or a certified pre-owned or a used car being sold by a dealership that are certainly just saved or downloaded and then being listed on a private listing because they look really good, right? It's a car that's getting good money, or this one looks particularly good, or shows really low mileage, or whatever it is. And so people are just going out there downloading pictures of other listings and listing it yourselves, right? So in this case, if that's true, what I would probably do, especially if there's a picture that looks pretty good, I would save that picture to your desktop and reverse image search it. So if you go to images.google.com, you can do a reverse image search, upload an image, and it will try to match it to images that look like it. Now, in some cases, it might find the exact image. And now I have done this and I have found the exact image. In fact, I was selling, or no, at the time I owned a Plymouth Prowler, but before I bought that Prowler, I was looking at a lot of listings. And one of the listings I was looking at was almost too good to be true. I wanted a particular color on this car, and this car was fantastic, and it was like $9,000 less than the other ones. And it was a little suspicious. So I just saved the image and I reversed image search it and found that it was listed. It was taken from a listing from a dealership in St. Louis. Okay. But the car had already been sold, but that listing was still listed there, marked sold. And so what I found is that they had just taken those pictures from an old listing and were using them to represent a car that they did not own. And in fact, I wasn't sure. Maybe they did buy that car from the dealership and they were selling it. I actually inquired, hey, can you tell me, usually they won't disclose a lot of stuff, but here's a listing for this car. And they looked at it. Well, the person looked at it and said, I can tell you that they don't own that car. We know where the car is. That is not the person who owns the car. So in that case, that saved me a lot of headache and possibly getting scammed out of some money. But a reverse image search might show you that picture. And if that picture is a listing somewhere else, again, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a scam. Some people are just lazy. They're using a picture of the same car, but from someone else because it's better than what they've got. But in most cases, you wouldn't want to do that anyway. You would want a more updated and recent picture. Okay. The other thing that I will do here, and it's usually sketchy to me, is if they can't provide a specific picture. Now, there may be reasons why you need specific pictures of specific things, especially on any listing. There are usually limits to how many pictures they can post. So they're trying to decide what's the most important thing to post. But there have been a number of times, especially when I bought older cars, that I'm worried about rust. And usually in that case, because I don't want to drive 3 hours just to look at a car, or 2 hours or 40 minutes, I will just ask, is there any way you can just take a quick picture of the undercarriage, just hold the camera under the phone, or hold your phone under the car, take a quick picture. I'm just curious how much rust or if there's damage or something like that. Sometimes they didn't include a picture of the engine. So you're just asking, hey, can you just pop the hood and take a picture of the engine top down? Just want to see it. I'm not sure if, if the cover's missing or the belts need to be replaced or something like that. So it could be a number of things, or, hey, I'm curious if the spare tire is there. Now, I'm not usually saying ask for a specific picture if you don't really need it. And if you're asking someone to do something, just because you're trying to validate it. If you're really serious about buying it, I don't feel bad about this, but just to be like, is this a real listing? And you're not really thinking about buying it. Could you go to your Continental GT and take a picture of the jeweling in the headlamp for me? Yeah, that's not cool, because that's still a lot of work that people have to do. And I've gotten that before, where someone's been like, okay, can you take a picture of something? I do. It actually shows what they were asking for. I sold Jaguar and it was absolutely spotless, rust free. They wanted a picture of the undercarriage. I sent it. They ghosted me. So it's not the end of the world. It's the price you pay as someone who's trying to sell a car. But if they aren't willing to do that, if they're like, hey, I'll do that as soon as I can, or they don't, or it's a sketchy picture or something like that, there are many times I've been like, hey, can you just take a picture of the odometer? I'm just curious what the latest mileage is. Oh, I'll tell you what the mileage is. I can't take a picture. I really want to just see if there's any check engine lights on or anything too. So if they can't take a picture, it might mean their car isn't really there. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I will say is a red flag is if the map location is sketchy. Now, what I mean by this is you'll have to know your area better than I will. But there are many times when I have looked at a map location here in the Chicago area. I've lived all over Chicago, and there were a couple times where the address is like a liquor store, or the address is a vacant lot, or the address doesn't really exist. There are some places where, that location actually doesn't have an address. It's just like, they don't always do that. Sometimes they have an A and B or something like that too. So there are many times when I've been like, hey, can I come see this car? And they're like, yeah, come to this address. And it's not a real address. There are sometimes I'm looking at a map location and I know it's just a kind of a desert area. There's nothing around it. Those certainly don't make me eager to go to those places. I usually want to go somewhere where it's safer, lit, heavily trafficked, all those places. In fact, you could certainly meet in the parking lot of a police station or a courthouse or something like that. None of those things are perfect, but they're certainly better. And if those are a red flag to other people, or they warn them off or something like that, then maybe it just wasn't worth doing, right? So check the map location. Is it sketchy? Do you really think that someone is selling a Rolls-Royce Cullinan in this area? Doesn't mean they're not, but doesn't necessarily mean they are either, right? All right. So the other thing I will say here is, do the pictures look like the location? So this is, again, going to depend on your knowledge of the area. Now, if you were buying a car out of state, I was trying to buy a car a while back, and I think it was from like Grand Rapids, Michigan. I am familiar with Grand Rapids, but I'm not familiar with Grand Rapids. So I couldn't tell you if that building or that industrial park is from Grand Rapids, but there are other areas that I do know. And one of the things that I know is that in some of the listings, some of the people were saying that this is my car. There was an Infiniti I was looking at, and this is my car. And they were taking the pictures of the car in front. And I know this is going to be a little weird, but I think it was called Hy-Vee, Hyvee grocery store. And so there were all these pictures. Now, it's possible that they had driven on a road trip by a Hy-Vee, but in my area, there are no Hy-Vees. I think you have to drive to Iowa from here to see a Hy-Vee, I think. Anyway, so I just asked because it was a little on the other side as well. And I said, okay, well, I said something like, oh, are those pictures taken recently? Okay, come see it. And they said something like, yeah, it was just down the street from me. If that's the case, if you're telling me you live where you are and that's at a Hy-Vee, I know that's not the right location. The other thing that is a little bit of a red flag to me is usually when the car is taken photos of without license plates, with protective materials on, usually behind a large building. Now, I say large building like a Costco type building. It's like unidentifiable, just a big brick building with like a big wide parking lot alley behind it. And a lot of times people will bring their cars back there. Usually dealerships will take them out the back so they can get some all around photos. And so when I see those, and it's just a generic place that doesn't say, hey, this person took the pictures in front of their house, or they didn't drive it down the street to a better house or in a mall or something like that. Most of the time, most people will take pictures of their car in their driveway or on their road, honestly, parallel parked or whatever. If some are really ambitious about it, sometimes they'll drive it to a little nicer place, maybe a golf course parking lot or something like that. But in most cases, if you're selling a car on Facebook Marketplace, you're trying to get $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 out of it. People aren't trying to Instagram the heck out of their car. And so to take a car to the back of a dealership or a big building, to take off their plates, to take some glamour shots of it is usually a little bit suspect to me. Okay. The other tip I will give you here is if you get interior pictures, obviously you're looking for things like check engine lights on or TPMS sensors or any error lights on the dashboard. But also what I like to look at is obviously the odometer. Does the odometer say what they're saying? Relatively close, at least. If they say it's 80,000 miles and it says 81,000 miles, usually that's fine, right? They're driving at their ballparking or whatever. But does the radio show a local station? If they say they're from Chicago, is it, and I don't listen to the radio as much anymore, but does it show 94.7 Light FM? Or if you're in Detroit, does it say 97.1 The Ticket? Or are they saying, hey, we're from California, but it's saying 760 WJR Detroit on the radio? Because if it is, those things can be a red flag that those pictures are not of the car that they are representing. Okay. The other thing I will tell you here is don't bring cash. This can be really tricky because sometimes they're like, I will only accept cash. Come to my house, pay it. You're setting yourself up to be robbed. This is always a tougher thing to do because I've done it in the past. I'm not saying I'm not guilty of this. I've talked to the person on the phone. I feel good about it. I go to their house. I bring cash. Nothing's ever happened. That's great. But I will say the last one I did, I actually went to this person's house. They were fairly local to me. I saw the car. I did not bring cash. But what we did is we went to my bank afterwards, the branch. He brought his title. I cashed out the cash from the bank that I needed. I will say if you are doing this and it's a larger dollar amount, depending on your bank, and larger dollar amount, honestly, anything over $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, they honestly will very rarely give you. Now, I can't imagine that they don't have it, but especially if you're doing $20,000, I have been told a couple times you have to book that like 3 days in advance. And I don't know if they're trying to head off crime or fraud or whatever, but in one case it was over $20,000 and they were like, it was a Wednesday and they were like, we can have it no earlier than Monday. Okay, whatever. But in that case, they can come and they can get cash, or if you're in a bank branch, usually they're they're comfortable taking a cashier's check or a money order. Some people like cash. They're trying to avoid the taxes or whatever on it. In that case, like I said, me and him went to my bank branch, cashed out the money, counted it, signed over the title, all good to go. I didn't worry about getting robbed. He wasn't worried about me stealing his car. That's how you should do it. That's how you should probably do it. All right. The last thing is the too good to be true. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people who are distressed, and I'm not saying that cars can't be underpriced, especially if the market's a little soft. But combine this with all the other things that I've mentioned. I have seen, and let me give you a real example here. I follow a lot of cars. I love cars. I don't just buy cars on a whim or anything like that. But I have a list of cars that since childhood I've loved, and that if I see a really good deal on one, I bought them and added them to my small collection. But sometimes I come across a car and the car should be $17,000, $18,000. So I was looking at a car and it was, and if you do find this car, you certainly are welcome to give it to me because I love it. But I think it was like 2005, 2006, 7 or something like that. Jaguar had an S-Type R. It was a 400 horsepower car. It was a high performance car. It wasn't like really like the cream of the crop. I don't know that it would ever be a collectible, but it had the older retro style to it. I really liked it, and I loved it in this dark metallic gray. So I've been looking for those, and generally, if you're trying to find them in lower mileage, they're hard to find. 30 or 40,000 miles on it will probably be a $16,000, $17,000, $18,000 car. Now, I found one, and it was supposedly here in the Midwest, and it was less than half that. It was $4,900, I think, listed. And it was immaculate, and the pictures were immaculate, and it didn't have a license plate on it, and it had floor coverings on it, and it was taken, the pictures were taken in a very generic place. And I reached out to the person. I said, oh man, this looks really great. Is there any way you could get a picture of the dashboard for me? I just want to confirm that the instrument cluster usually came with this very small, like little digital screen on it. That's not replaced. I want to just make sure that it's all original, not aftermarket. Oh, I can't get a picture. It's busy and I'm traveling at the moment. So of course everything is sketchy, right? Wire me the money and then you can have it picked up whenever you want. I'll send you the address and blah, 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 blah. Eventually the listing disappears because the profile disappears. So I tried to check everything and I can't say for sure that it was a scam, but it certainly seemed like it was a scam. Is it better to lose nothing than to lose thousands of dollars? Yeah, I would say and that's probably better than getting a great deal on a car that you could probably get a great deal on at some point in the future too. But that is my suggestions for not getting scammed while buying a car on Facebook Marketplace. There certainly can be some great deals. the older you go, the cheaper you go, the more local you should go, because you really need to inspect it. Look for rust, look for those quirks, look for broken headlights, all that other stuff. But you can definitely find some reasonable deals from good people on there. So hopefully that helps. I'll see you later.